use the intact fork from the other side. So doing a little bit arse about here, but I'm going to show you how I take this to bits. The first things you're going to need to remove are this protector here and the little blanking plug from underneath. Okay, next we need to loosen the damping rod bolt, which is housed up inside the bottom of the slider. But to do that you need some soft-jawed vise to hold the actual slider itself. So I'll just slot him in here and tighten that up. For me, this is handy to use my old Black & Decker workmate here, which I've had for decades, which is used to help me build this garage and various other bits and pieces, and it still comes in handy for motorbike stuff. Okay, it's about a 5mm. And while it's being held in place, you might need to put a little arm on an Allen key if that's what you're using. And that's got that loosened off. So just loosen it at this stage. You don't want to open it fully up or all the oil's going to come out. Okay. So the top bolt here is the next thing that we come out, need to take out. That's already been pre-loosened when you had the fork still in the yoke. So the step of taking this out is a dangerous one. Well, it can be dangerous because the top bolt is actually held under pressure of that top spring. So it doesn't hurt to put on a bit of eyewear. And it's a 24 bolt there. So basically you want to ease this out while being very careful because it could release in all of a sudden. So you want to put some downward pressure while you're releasing it. There we go. So there's our top plug off. So we can now extract the bits and pieces out to look after and clean up as before. There's our spacer, and I'll take out the other bits bit by bit. You basically can now withdraw some of the other elements. Spring first. Now this is where it can get a bit messy, so make sure you've got an oil dispenser nearby. Okay, so we just let the spring out, drain off what we can. We'll sit him up somewhere awaiting cleaning. And then we can basically pour out the oil. Once again, lovely black oog. So once we've getting to the end of that there, we can just let the last little bit drop out. I mean, if you've got a little bit of patience to let it drain out, it makes it less messy when you're dealing with the next stage. Let's give it a few more pumps. Okay, that should do it for now. So the next thing we want to do is actually, the damper rod is fixed in place here. We want to undo that damper rod fully. Now the damper rod can actually turn depending on how much we've loosened it. Get it out like this, well and good. If it feels like it's just turning and not doing anything, it's probably because the damper rod inside is turning as well. So the next step there is actually to hold that inside. You can actually insert a broomstick or something down in there to engage with the top of the damper rod. Stop it turning, and then if your luck's in, you'll be able to turn that without the damper rod turning and actually make a bit of progress in taking the bolt out. It feels like it's doing the trick now. And there we have it coming. Pop that out of the way. Now the bottom bush actually won't go through the top bush, and in getting the actual oil seal out, that you can use that to your advantage. The first thing, I'll pop out the oil seal, the dust seal. You can't get under it with a screwdriver. You might want to use a little picker just to get started. Just work your way around. Just being careful, of course, not to scratch the slider. And you can just extract the dust seal off the top like that and put it somewhere out of the way. So the next thing to extract is your retaining clip. So you can see down in here, the oil seal has a metal retaining clip. I suspect you can see that there. We can't get the oil seal out until that retaining clip is released. So once again, just being very careful not to scratch the actual fork tube. Slip that retaining clip off. Now we can actually make use of the fact that the bottom bush won't come out past the top bush by actually using it to actually drive the oil seal and the top bush up and out. There fell my damper rod bolt at the bottom. So we can basically use this to drive the oil seal out. Might just take the damper rod itself out first. Take out the damper rod itself. There. And then just by process of pulling up like that, we'll remove the oil seal, the top bush, and the actual seat. This here for a moment. So yeah, we can basically extract the oil seal over the top. Put that aside. We also carefully retain the washer or the seat, and that the bottom bush is fixed. The top bush, once again, gently slide out. And the only last piece remaining is the damper rod seat, which is in the bottom, and there it comes. Go take him out there, and now we give this a bit of a wash and a clean up, and we'll put it all together along with the other one. Okay, everything's washed up, dried, laying out. Just important when you have both forks disassembled together that you keep the bits and pieces separately. I've got my right hand fork in the bucket here, all the bits and pieces, and the other one's here, because you don't want to get parts mixed up between the two. You can actually amplify any wear or damage if you put them all back together like that. But the question now, I guess, is I've said I'm reconditioning these forks. What does that actually mean, as distinct from just changing the oil? So basically it means looking at all the bits and pieces, checking for wear, and replacing things that are either damaged or look like they might be coming to the end of their life. But you can't replace everything. It doesn't make economic sense to replace everything, and I'll explain why. Okay, when you look across the broad range of components here, some are obviously disposables and consumables that you replace whenever you do this job. Fork seals, oil seals, they're about $26 or $28 each. There's a washer that goes with the damper rod bolt at the bottom, a crush washer, obviously needs replacing. An O-ring, Triumph recommends, doesn't matter how it looks, replace the O-ring on this top bolt. But they're all quite reasonable. That O-ring, I think, I've got, speaking in Australian prices here, $2.50 for the O-ring. The crush washer at the bottom, $1.70, so they're hardly going to break the bank. Plus, you know, close to $50 for those two, I guess. But then there's the issue of some of the other components which may be damaged or worn, that you, having taken the trouble to pull the thing to bits, do you need to replace them? One item here that Triumph recommends to replace every time you pull the forks to bits as a matter of course is this piston O-ring at the top of the damper rod. So I think you can see that there. It's a little plasticky thing. This looks in pretty good condition. The price of that is $14.80 to replace that. So what do I do? In my case, I'm going to replace that. I've already got two of those on order, one for each of the forks. They look fine to me, but I'm going to replace them anyway. It's not a high cost. But when you look at some other things in the stanchion here, the actual fork tube, I don't know whether you can see it here, I might put up some photos, but there's a little bit of pitting. And given that the O-rings were leaking before, I have to wonder to what degree that pitting caused the leaking oil seals. I mean, oil seals can also start to leak when you get little bits of stone and stuff underneath them. It may not be due to pitting on the forks. But anyway, that's a matter to consider. But to replace a fork tube, what do we got for that price? Fork tube is $525 Australian. I mean, you've also got this bottom bush here which you can't replace. This one's got a couple little marks on it, but I don't think they're any great issue. Yeah, $525. That's a major investment to replace that. Similarly, the fork slider here is around about $440. Once again, this all looks pretty neat and fine. On the next level down, so I guess what I'm saying is if you get to the stage where you've got to replace fork tubes and the sliders, you know, it's getting to the price close to what I paid for the whole bike, and it's like, is this really a viable economic thing to do? This damper rod, that surprised me. A new damper rod, $622 for that. It's almost the most expensive component in the thing. Anyway, luckily mine all look pretty fine. I'll show you in a little while how we actually check. One of the things you check the fork tube for actually is pitting, but also straightness. And it doesn't matter what your bike is, if there's any evidence that the fork tubes are bent, you need to replace them. Or ditch the bike, depending how much your bike's worth. These springs are another matter. Let me just make a bit of space here. They say you should check the springs. I'm going to grab mine from the other fork here. Check them between both sides, because I don't know how well you can see that there, but if there's any evidence that they are showing different signs of compression or different lengths, in this case they look pretty spot on. So I'll put that guy back. Springs are somewhere in between. They're sort of a semi disposable item, I would say. That large spring here to replace in Australia is $130. I mean, that's still a lot of money. I don't want to pay $130 if I don't need to, but to replace the spring if it looked like there was any bad wear, rust, or it was different to the other spring. Triumph, I think any of the manufacturers recommend that if there's a difference between the two springs, you replace both the springs. Here's a funny one. This return spring, how much do you think that costs compared to this? That's 180 bucks. Sorry, $130. How much do you think this little guy is? Would you believe it? It's 131. In Australian dollars, it's $1 more than the big spring. And once again, I'll take the opportunity to compare that with my spring from the other side. I mean, at least to my eyes, I can't see any difference here, and they both look in pretty good nick, so I'm not replacing that. Okay, cut a long story short, I'm going to be replacing my washer, obviously on the damper rod bolt. My little blanking plug down the bottom actually broke when I took it out, so clearly I'm replacing that. I think that was $2. My O-ring here, 70 cents, something like that, $2.50. Replacing the seals. The top bush here is actually a semi-replaceable item as well. Mine, if there's any signs of any scuffing or roughness on these, definitely replace, because they're just going to scratch your tubes. But that actually seems pretty good. It's actually only $18 to replace that anyway for the top bush. Unfortunately, as I said before, the bottom bush is intrinsic to the fork tube. So if you want to replace the bottom bush, you can't do that without replacing the whole fork tube, and that is, yeah, $525. Okay, before I put all this stuff back together, obviously I'll replace the bits and pieces I need, but I just want to say a couple of things about checking for straightness on the fork tubes, and then what I'm going to do in this case about the divoting on this particular fork tube. Okay, when it comes to checking your fork legs for straightness, or the fork tubes for straightness, a lot of the manuals recommend using a pair of V-blocks and a dial gauge, but unless you have a very well-equipped workshop, you probably don't have that. Most people do, however, have a dining room table, or in this case we've got a granite bench top in our kitchen, and on the assumption it's pretty straight, you can simply check by putting the fork down on it, rolling it and checking the gap. You'll very soon see if that gap changes anywhere, and hence if the fork is straight. And luckily both my fork tubes are very straight. Or the other way, I was actually just having a chat with a mate of mine who reminded me that if for whatever reason you don't have a straight kitchen table or a straight bench top, you can always use a straight edge, the same sort of process. I guess the essence of it is that when you spin, if you've got something that's spinning relative to, you'll quickly see if there's a bend, because the gap will change somewhere. Okay, well, I guess the only other bit just to check with the fork tubes, once you've determined whether they're straight or not, and if they're crooked you've got to replace them, is, I don't know whether there's any more technical way to do this, but I just sort of close my eyes and feel, and if I can feel rough divots, often you can see ones that you can't feel, but I've definitely got a few here that I can feel quite well, and I want to sand them down. You'll often have a bit of scuffing around where the clamps on the yoke actually go, and the main area though where the actual fork seal has to seal onto the tube is around this area. So right up to where you've got your scuff marks, I just sort of have a little bit of a feel, and yeah, there's definitely some bits I want to smooth out here, nothing too major. Last thing you want to do is put a new set of fork seals and dust covers on and find that your divots rip them up again and you've got a leak again within months. So okay, so I'm just going to put these into a nice soft jawed clamp and give them a little bit of a sanding. So I've got a few bits of sandpaper here. I'm just going to start off with an 800 just to remove the biggest edges off that, and then I'm going to finish off with a 1500 and a 2000. I've also got something here I've used with other types of painting before, which is just an abrasive hand mat as well, and I think they call that extra fine, so I think it's about 1500 to 2000 grade. Okay, just to give it a little bit of bite, a little bit of WD-40 on there as well can help it work away. So I'll give that a go, and I think we're pretty well ready to start reassembling the forks. Only one other thing I'd say, and I was sort of ready to do it if necessary, and there's some good videos on YouTube if you find yourself in this position, but if your divoting is pretty extreme and the sanding is not enough to get it down to a nice smooth finish, people use some super glue or epoxy, sometimes two-part epoxy. Let it set hard and sand that off, and that actually has get some good results apparently. I've never actually done it. I think in this case I won't need to. I can tell that the sandpaper will probably let me get down to the point where it's smooth enough for me to put those new seals on and be confident they're not going to cut again. Okay, but yeah, if you find yourself where you've sanded and that's really not going to do the job, go and have a look at the videos of the guys doing this with the epoxy. It seems to have a good outcome. The only thing to mention here, I guess, is people say it's good to sand around the tube, and a little bit of liquid there, like even some fork oil or some WD-40, something like that, or some thinners, can be good to give you that little bit extra bite that you need. You can actually feel it as soon as you've started to get the edge off some of those. I can feel it running smoother here.
Oh
Okay, well that's all done now, and the final test, of course, is how it feels. Like I said, I think if you've got a fork tube that has no sensible or nothing that you can feel in terms of divets, it's hardly likely to cause any problems with your fork seal. So I've been pretty lucky in this case. Even though the fork seals were pretty RS when I got the bike, the actual fork tubes themselves are in relatively good nick, and definitely all that roughness that was there before I started the sanding process is gone. So all good. I think it's time now, and I've checked the other one as well, so I think it's time now to put the forks back together and get them back on the bike. But don't forget, if you do have really bad pitting, don't go to the trouble of putting new seals on the bike. You're just going to waste your money, and you really want to try that epoxy treatment. If that doesn't work, you might need to get yourself some new forks.